right. Good evening, everyone. So excited that you're back. We have such an amazing group of folks who have been gathering every week. This is our third week to read the pastoral letter of Archbishop Wester. We're very excited that you're here and that you are reading this important document, this very historical document, actually, especially coming from a bishop from the US, because we realize the responsibility that we have considering the issue. And so today we are very, very lucky to have a person who works on this issue and has been working on that for a while. Her name is Leona Morgan. Leona Morgan is Dene, uses pronouns she, her, is an activist and community organizer who has been fighting nuclear colonialism since 2007. She attributes related health impacts to her family and others who are living near uranium production sites to the resulting environmental contamination. In 2014, Leona co-founded Dene No Nukes, a vehicle for Dene and Indigenous driven work, which includes the Radiation Monitoring Project and Whole No initiative. In 2016, she co-founded the Nuclear Issues Study Group, a multi-racial and intergenerational grassroots organization that focuses on nuclear issues in New Mexico. She also collaborates nationally and internationally, connecting the entire nuclear fuel chain, from uranium extraction to nuclear weapons, energy, and radioactive waste issues. Leona is a graduate student at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and she is also going to share an introduction, a prayer with you all. So here she is, Leona.
Great, thank you so much, Roxana, and thank you so much for the invitation. I will just introduce myself again in my traditional way, and then I'm going to just do a really quick prayer to get us started and immediately go into a slide presentation. Thank you all for being here. I've never presented to Pax Christi, so this is exciting for me, and I think also a challenge. So I'm excited to hear some of your questions and discussion. Right now, I am on the Navajo Nation. I'm based in Albuquerque, and I, like Roxana said, I identify as Dene. Many of you may be familiar with the term Navajo, but I am culturally, I am Dene. So this is how a lot of us identify today. We're stepping away from the term Navajo, which is a colonizer word. Traditionally, we start with our clans, which is a way to identify our kinship. And so I'm just going to do that in my own language, and then I'll get started with the presentation. So yat e she e twitch eat ni nishle tana bitni bashichin kia ani dashiche to glini dashinala she e Leona Morgan Yinchia nuclear issues banashnish. So yeah, I just said my clans, and so I'm just going to say a very short prayer just to ask for the evening and the study session to go well. So shidina webinar igi Pax Christi igi nujanago dolef machine. Okay, so for me, I got involved in uranium mining issues because uranium mining affected my family. So back in 2006 and 2007, there was an incredibly quick rise in the price of uranium, and that made the companies that used to mine back in the beginning of nuclear proliferation. So the beginning of like World War II and the Cold War and things like that, a lot of companies came in They started mining. But before I begin, I just want to explain how I got involved. That's actually part of my presentation. So right now, like Roxana said, I'm an organizer and an activist, and that's because a lot of my family, my relatives were getting cancer, and I knew my grandmother died of lung cancer. My grandmother was a traditional woman. She did not smoke cigarettes, and so I immediately connected this to maybe exposure to radon gas, or maybe she inhaled an alpha particle that might have caught the wind during the mining days. I don't know. We don't know how my family got cancer, and some of my relatives passed away not knowing what that cancer was from. Today, a lot of people have different health complications all over the reservation. So my talk, I'm going to focus a lot on the Navajo Nation and the reservation. However, something that's really important to keep in mind is the stories I'm going to share and everything I'm talking about. These are not isolated incidences. So I do a lot of work, and I've traveled to many, many places. And a lot of the stories I've heard from other communities regarding uranium or other types of mining, resource extraction, and then also communities affected by uranium or other parts of the nuclear fuel chain. So maybe it was a weapons facility, maybe it was a nuclear power plant. A lot of the stories they're different people, different places, different facilities, but in general, there's a lot of communities getting sick. Their people are dying, their food is affected, their water is contaminated, and then they start to wonder how did these things happen, especially when it's affecting their children. So we, as fetuses are unborn children, or however you call it, they are the most vulnerable to the impacts of radiation. So a lot of the stories that I have heard, they're very similar all over the world. And people in these places, a lot of times, they're not in a position of power to fight these things. They don't have access to a lot of money to get lawyers and then time. So a lot of times people are in communities that are already overburdened. So I know in some of the readings, there's a lot of references to the poor. I went to Catholic school. I don't think a lot of my colleagues know that. I was in Catholic school. I see Joni. I grew up learning all these things, and my Catholic school was actually the sisters here at St. Michael's Elementary School. And the fathers were from the order. They were Franciscans. Okay, it's been a while. So I am very aware of the vows of poverty and chastity and obedience, I think is the other one from my upbringing. And the vow of poverty, I think, has a lot to do with understanding. In this case, I'm going to relate it to environmental justice. So let's say people that are in already overburdened communities. Like I was saying, a lot of these stories are in communities where people don't have access to even, let's say, language. So these are all the stories from the past. People think, oh, that was history. But, when the government came in and killed our people and they were stealing our land, a lot of us had no idea because it was a different language. We weren't aware of this. We had no guns. Today, it's kind of the same thing. It's just a different form of technology. Like when the uranium companies come in, to me, that's a different form of colonization. They're still stealing our land. They're still stealing our water and our air through this invisible form of contamination. So I'm going to talk about some of these things in the presentation. I'm going to show a lot of slides. And I really want to focus the discussion on uranium mining because this is the work that I've done. But like I was saying, in the readings and some of the work around nuclear abolition, I don't do the work. I got to be honest, I don't work on nuclear weapons. I work on uranium mining and nuclear waste from energy. But when I look at uranium as a source for both the weapons and energy, to me, I'm really focusing on the root cause of both. even though I'm not specifically fighting nuclear weapons work, doing weapons work, my organization that is in Albuquerque, it's called Nuclear Issue Study Group. We do have some folks in the group that focus on Los Alamos National Labs and some of the other weapons issues we had in New Mexico, because we have a lot. My personal focus is on the waste from energy, from nuclear power plants, as well as the uranium. So I'm going to go into the history of some of the uranium impacts. And again, I just want to emphasize, this is a similar story. You can plug in to people in Mongolia, people in Australia, in different parts of the world who have been impacted by colonization and all of these extractive industries. So I'm really focusing on Navajo Nation in the United States, but it's only an example of other situations. So yeah, I know it's a long introduction to the talk, and it's a talk I do often about uranium mining, but we're going to pause and take a break to have a little bit of a discussion around how this relates to the pastoral and other topics. So I am sharing my screen now, and so I really, just want to hone into uranium mining as part of nuclear abolition. Fighting uranium mining is what I'm talking about, not supporting uranium mining. Okay, so I did my introduction, and I'm going to go into a discussion, or I'm going to just present a bunch of slides about the history of uranium mining on the reservation, on Navajo Nation. And this is important, I think. I don't know how many of you, for me, I think it's really important to understand, especially if you are focusing on weapons. I think it's really important to know about energy issues, and then vice versa. If you're working on energy, I think it's really important to know, something about the weapons work. So this presentation is probably a little bit different than the rest, because at this point in time, again, I'll be very frank, I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I am very much working on being a practicing Diné. So that's my goal in life. So the very first thing I kind of got into this, you all can take a minute to read the definition that I use for nuclear colonialism. And yeah, I think this is a good place to start, because for me, working on these issues, when we get to the root of, how did our family get sick? Why is the water contaminated? Just going really deep into the cause of these things, because if, as an activist and as a community organizer, these are things we want to figure out how to address on multiple levels. It could be political, it could be spiritual. A lot of the work that I do as an Indigenous person, it's kind of funny because I actually separate my work, and this is a big challenge in my personal journey, because there's the Indigenous work I do with my people, with ceremony and prayer, and I really keep that separate from my work I do with activists in Washington, D.C., New York City, I never do prayers like I did today. So this is a different thing. I'm realizing it's really necessary to combine the work, to educate non-Indigenous people about Indigenous culture. I didn't think it was necessary, but I think it's important to understand the root causes of racism, poverty, again, contamination. And I think all of this, it really goes back to colonization. So for me, looking at nuclear colonialism, this map, it's a good infographic that shows the number of nuclear tests in different parts of the world where, I'm sure a lot of it was done by the United States, but really, these are tests done by nuclear powers. So what countries have nuclear weapons? Is it poor countries in the global South? Is it people of color countries? It's usually a country of, some dominating power that has exploited maybe some other country. And oftentimes a lot of these countries don't even have uranium. So this is another issue. It's another topic some people refer to as resource curse. So it's often that Indigenous people live in places where, or people of color or the poor often live in these places where the resources are. So I'm talking about uranium, but you can, plug in other minerals like lithium, coal, and then it's the same thing. They come out of places where people are hurt and exploited, but yet those resources go somewhere else where they're used. And specifically nuclear weapons is the most perverse, in my opinion, because of the reason for it is to kill other people. And so one of the things that hurts me as an Indigenous person is a lot of the uranium happens to occur in places that we consider sacred. So for example, Mount Taylor in New Mexico is a sacred mountain. The Grand Canyon, the Black Hills, these are places where Indigenous people still live and still use and still need for prayers and to continue our culture into the future, yet that they have been contaminated because of the exploitation from mining. And if you notice the dates, 1945 to 1998, I would love to see one past 1998, but I think a lot of us, especially because you all work on weapons, the beginning of the nuclear arms race, how that all started, I'm thinking the uranium mining, it had to have started, nobody knows exactly when. We say the 40s, because they needed the uranium by 45, they needed to have it for the bomb. But the uranium that was mined specifically for weapons, that came much later. However, there was a lot of mining done, for the Industrial Revolution and different things where uranium was coming out of the ground and people didn't know it was still, contaminating. But this, anyways, going back to the presentation, this infographic, if you notice, Japan is over here. So those are very small mushroom clouds by number. Here is Nevada. So lots of tests, lots of fallout all over the United States. So it is in Indigenous communities, but it impacts everybody, not just Indigenous people. And that's something about radiation. It impacts all of us. And right now, this is another slow, I want to spend some time on this slide and go through it slowly, but we have a lot of more slides and some of them are just pictures and I'll go through those much more quickly. But for me, when I think about the nuclear arms race and uranium mining, it goes back to colonization, even something that is, I don't know how many of you are aware of the doctrine of discovery. I understand you're going to do a study session on it. But yeah, it goes all the way back to the 15th century. So for me, as an Indigenous person, this is one of the most hurtful things that exists. So the doctrine of discovery is basically the thing that, and my interpretation of it is, this is the thing that legalizes genocide and slavery. It's basically the piece of paper that says we are not human. We are less than human. So therefore it's okay to subjugate us. It's okay to steal our land. It's okay to do nuclear experiments on us. It's okay to continue to do these things this day and not compensate our people through things like the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. So some of the slides I'm going to get to, I attribute it going all the way back to the doctrine of discovery, because in the United States, the laws dealing with uranium mining cleanup, and I just mentioned RECA, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, a lot of these laws are based on the history of the United States, such as Manifest Destiny and things that were designed specifically to kill our people. So genocide, relocation. Relocation is not spoken of very much, but that was part of the 1872 mining law, was to basically take land, and that could have been through, killing the people on the land or relocating them to get to the subsurface, which could be, this law covers mining for minerals such as gold, copper, lead, silver, molybdenum, profitable minerals, and uranium. And the thing about it is, it says a lot of stuff, but it doesn't include for environmental factors. The thing this law was made for was to legalize the theft of our land. And it didn't include anything about giving royalties to the governing state. So the United States today gets no royalties if mining is done under this law. And the cleanup, I'm not sure how the cleanup laws work today, because obviously there's an EPA and now there's some cleanup regulations, but a lot of the old stuff before the 70s, because the EPA didn't exist until the 70s, NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, wasn't passed until 1969. So all of that mining before, for World War II and the Cold War, was largely unregulated. There was no laws. So even if it was regulated, there was nothing to say like, oh, the company contaminated, here's the background level of radiation, and they contaminated up to here, so they have to clean it back to here. There was no background radiation levels taken. So there was no way for us to prove they contaminated this much. So today, pretty much everything is cleaned up to what they call alternate concentration levels. So even if there are laws, the companies still get away with less than safe cleanup. And then when you ask what is safe, depending what agency, that means a different thing. Depending what year, what company, all of these things, what the uranium was used for, if it was weapons or energy. For me, there is no safe level, Okay, so I'm so sorry, but I'm gonna go through the next slides pretty quickly. And I know I just got a couple minutes here. This slide, it just lists a lot of the policies that I think, to me, make it very challenging to do my work. And in my work, I came upon challenges to the things I want to do today because of these laws, which people think, oh, it was a long time ago, it's history, but they're still impacting us today. And so, for example, the formation of the Navajo Nation was not to support Indigenous sovereignty. It was to take our coal. So part of the reservation, a lot of the Navajo Nation has been mined for coal. And so we as Diné people, we've been going through this for a long time. And our people, we're still working on self-governance and all of that, but it's been really tough because of how much resource extraction has happened. And when things like COVID occur, the lack of water and things like that, it's still impacting us today. So the next slides, I have way too many slides, and I'm just going to explain what they are. And I'm going to go through the pictures a little quickly. I might need like an extra 1 or 2 minutes, if that's okay from the facilitators. So this slide is actually more about nuclear energy, and I'm going to spend a quick minute to explain why nuclear energy is not a solution to climate change, which I know is not part of your focus, but it's related. So here's uranium mining exploration. This is the fight that I've been very involved in, the things that affecting my people. Today, this is what's affecting the state of New Mexico, is the proposal to store all of the country's waste from nuclear power plants in New Mexico. And the waste would travel on the railroad, again, going through the reservation, which is my #1 concern. But the issue with why is nuclear being considered a solution for climate change is because they only take the carbon footprint here. And we know, there's radiation, heat, other things coming out, not just steam. And they do not calculate the carbon footprint of all of the beginning steps or the waste storage afterward. So it's just convenient for them to say, oh, this is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The IPCC came out with a report in 2018 that is really used by the nuclear lobby and others to promote nuclear energy as a solution to climate change. So when that started to come up, they have their propaganda. First it was atoms for peace, now it's atoms for climate. I was nervous, but what makes me really nervous is not this issue of climate change, it's actually the war with Russia right now. So once that started, the price of uranium started to go up again. And I introduced myself saying the last time that happened for me was 2006, 2007. So right now it's a little bit nerve-wracking for people, I think, in our line of work. I mentioned Mount Taylor as a sacred place. So the next few slides talk about the world's largest uranium spill. And this is not really related to the topic, but I think it's important that folks understand this happened in the Indigenous community, and it was only 3 months after 3 Mile Island. So everybody heard about 3 Mile Island. People were probably evacuated. These people still live here today. They're still trying to fight for cleanup. It's a very long story. But the thing about it is, this is the world's largest uranium spill and people don't know about it. So here are some of the community members. Edith Hood she was working there. Larry King was working there. They do an event every year to bring attention and awareness. Now what's happening is there's a cleanup proposal, but the proposal is, and I know I didn't go into detail because I'm running out of time, but essentially there's a uranium mine and a uranium mill, and the spill happened at the mill. Now the cleanup plan is to move the waste from the mine on top of the mill. And so the community's like, that doesn't make any sense because that could just spill again, especially with climate change. This, it's a floodplain. It happened one time. So it's an incredibly ridiculous plan. This is just one instance of cleanup. The Navajo Nation is one of the only places in the country getting cleanup. There's over 15,000 abandoned uranium mines in the country. There's other places that got cleanup, different types of cleanup. I'm talking about abandoned uranium mines. So some uranium mines have been cleaned up, yes, under regulations after 1970, I'm sure. But these are mines that were abandoned. So companies that set up an LLC temporarily and then just walked away from the site. There's a lot of holes in the ground. There's a big mess in some of these places. Some places it's small, some places it's really big, like Churchrock. Now, this is a really, pretty map that the EPA made about all the good work they're doing. This is a community map. An activist, Chris Shuey, he works with the community. He made this map and he added the mill sites, the blue squares, which are way more contaminating than the uranium mine sites. So that's just a quick show of, okay, 15,000 of those across the country that need to be cleaned up, mostly in communities, where they're overburdened or don't have the power to fight it. And that's why I say nuclear is environmental racism. So we work, for environmental justice. These are things I work on with my Indigenous colleagues. And it's a really different fight when I'm working with non-Indigenous people. So this is an interesting place in my work personally that I'm trying to figure out, how do we do this together? If you look at this map where all the uranium deposits are in the country, you can see where the uranium companies will target. Now this is a map with the power plants. And if you combine them, now you can see, okay, they took out the uranium and then the uranium, or to be honest, we don't know where the uranium goes. And the uranium that's used in nuclear energy or nuclear weapons, we don't know where that comes from either. There's no easy trail where the companies can, there's no dotted line. But essentially, there are no nuclear power plants in the uranium area. So we are the ones, being exploited for the resource. It's used somewhere else, but yet now there's 2 proposals to bring all of the nuclear waste from all of the country to New Mexico and Texas. I'm going to wrap up with this issue because this is pretty much the end of my slide presentation. These are the railroads going through the res all over the country, the railroads. And this is just zooming into New Mexico and showing some of the other nuclear facilities. Like we have waste control specialists, that's in Texas. WIP is where they take waste from weapons facilities. WIP is the waste isolation pilot plant. It's different. It's not the same as the waste facility I was talking about, which is the proposed Holztech site. And then there's another proposed CIS site over here. So there's 2 proposed sites next to an existing nuclear waste dump, which is the only deep geological repository in the country, which means we're already overburdened, by the nuclear industry and by the oil and gas industry. So just so you know, they want to bring all this waste to a place where there's active fracking and mining, and then across the street is an active mine. And then a little ways down over in Carlsbad, there's a, sorry, my Carlsbad is over here, you can't really see it. There's a sinkhole in Carlsbad, I think from the fracking. So this just to paint a picture. I didn't have time to go through the Sacred Land Trust map, but this is a really awesome map that shows a lot of the facilities in New Mexico. There are so many. So this map, maybe during discussion or when we come back, I can go online and then we can zoom in, because this map shows, like, here's Los Alamos, and one of the creators of the map is actually here with us. So the place I was talking about is down here. My people, we're from up here in the Uranium country. I live in Albuquerque right now, but yeah, so this is kind of just a real quick tour of what I'm dealing with. There's a lot of other work people do on the Trinity site down here, Rika, and other people all over New Mexico. A lot of us are in communication. We try to support each other, but it's just so much work that, nobody can do it all. So that's where we're at now. And so I just I know there's some other discussion questions I think are in the chat. My quick discussion questions are just, what will you take away? What can we do? I'll end with a really short story. I was saying I don't work on nuclear issues, but earlier this year, there was a group who put a proposal into the city of Albuquerque for the city to pass a resolution in support of the UN treaty on prohibiting nuclear weapons, on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. So it didn't pass, and like I said, I don't really do this work, but I went to the meeting and I sat there. I couldn't sit there all night. They put it at the end of the agenda, which is, some tactic that they use a lot, different people. But the people did sit there all night. They got their issue heard, and, we tried to support. We showed up. Some of our group members held up our banner outside. We didn't do a lot, but that's what we tried to, to bring awareness to folks outside. We put it on Facebook, and it didn't pass, but I'm sure we'll try again. And when they do, I'll make sure to sit through the whole meeting. I don't know, because I'm also a grad student. I think I had school or something, but they heard it, I think, at 11:30 at night. But even just sitting in the chairs, holding space, being support, that's something people can do. So that's my, last year we did a little rally when the treaty went into force. So, whatever support is out there, I just want to leave the question, what can you do? What can we do? And then there's some other questions in there about, has there been any collaboration? Oh, those are to me, but, and the fires. Yeah, we can discuss this after the break. I think we're going to do the breakout rooms now. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Leona. And yes, thank you so much for your presentation. I know it was very in-depth, and it's important to hear what the indigenous people of this land have to say, because it's the right thing to do, to uplift the voices of people who have been invaded, have been pushed out of their land, and that's why we're making this space for your voice. And as people can tell, your presentation is very specific. And that's what we need. We need to get specific about this, because it becomes local when it's specific, and then we can do more at the local level. And so this is important. Right now, we're going to break into groups. We're going to share a couple of questions also from the pastoral letter, so you can think about them, and keeping this presentation in mind, of course, and discuss away. And then we're going to come back and do a report backs. And maybe if we have some time to also address some of the questions, and then we're going to close with a prayer. So I'm going to send you all to your breakout rooms now, and we're going to stop the recording as well. Great. Welcome back, everyone. I'm so glad that you had the opportunity to chat together, and to relate what you have heard from Leona with the letter, and get your ideas going and thinking about what are all the things that we can do at the local level, at the federal level, at the international level, of course, always starting from the grassroots level, right? So I'm going to, pass it to Leona so you can get the feedback from folks and respond to any questions that they have and whatnot.
Sure, and I apologize for going over time, which limits our discussion. And so I'll just go quickly into answering about one of the questions in the chat about collaboration. I kind of mentioned earlier, I don't work on nuclear weapons. Just to be very honest, I had nothing to do with the pastoral work, and it was significant when it came out in New Mexico. However, I do a lot of other work, and that's kind of where the presentation comes from. For this particular study session, I was asked to focus on part 3 and 4, I think specifically, but I really wanted to hone into one of the messages I know about morality, how it is nuclear weapons is moral, it's morally problematic. And for me, I feel like that's kind of where we connect, being that I don't appreciate uranium from my sacred place being used to kill people somewhere else in the world, especially when we knew the weapons were not necessary to drop on Japan. So I just wanted to say quickly that I don't do the work and specifically on this. And I know there were some recommendations. If people want to talk about those, I'd be happy to kind of explain where points of intervention or action can occur. Maybe because of the time, I could also leave my information in the chat if someone wants to contact me later. Thank you.
Thank you. And we can maybe get a couple of groups to report back, and you can raise your hand using the reaction button on Zoom. Feel free to raise your hand and give us a report back of what you've chatted in your breakout room. Let's see. We'll do this first. All right, we have a taker here, Greg Cornine, and we are obviously asking folks to be very brief so we can get more folks to participate as well.
So the question of how best to support the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, one idea was campaigns of letters to the editor, not just a single letter, but getting people to write letters as sort of a wave. And another idea, which apparently a lot of cities have done in the United States, is to write, is to get their city councils to pass a resolution saying that the city supports the treaty and wants the United States to join the treaty.
I guess a quick response, I think any letters to any people in power are incredibly important. And now is election year. And I think for us in New Mexico and in different places, of course, but I totally support letters. I think each letter represents, a significantly larger group of people. And I just ask, when we talk about solidarity and unity, when you're writing your letters about the TPNW, you might mention the Churchrock spill. You might mention these other things. So whenever I do work on uranium, I try to mention both. And I think that's a good way to have solidarity. But yes, letters, I have a list of letters that I know, like Rika is something, even saying thank you. This is a long issue I can't really go into detail about, but maybe I can send some notes to the organizers about different topics that might be included in letters, if that's helpful.
How do you spell Rika? Rico? What was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep talking about Rika because I think it's a place, I think this is a time where the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, this is something, it's a long thing to explain, but basically it was compensation for some people and it needs to include more people, but it was supposed to sunset in July this year. So they only expanded it for 2 years, but it needs to be expanded forever and include everybody, not just some people. So this is a whole nother webinar. Thank you, Judy.
Yeah, there's so much to go into. Any other hands or any other comments? I see some folks commenting in the chat as well, but if anybody wants to say, just give us a report back about your conversations, that would be also great.
I haven't been able to find my button here. Is okay to talk?
Mhm.
Yeah, we were in group 3. One of the things that came up is the kind of the anti-technology kind of a dominance that takes over. And actually a lot of these things with the nuclear waste and whatever, if we go to a nuclear plasma technology, you can actually neutralize a lot of this, including the material there in the dumps, especially when we get to thermonuclear fusion, where we get a much dense propulsion system, we can deal with a lot of the waste. So one, the economic solutions to this, we've got to come to an economic fight that actually deals with this collapsing financial system. The war is a predicate of the financial blowout with these derivatives and no production. So we discussed generally that. How do we take it to a bigger fight and actually get the power of nations moving against these networks, these speculators that own NATO and deploy them as a thug? So there's a Schiller Institute event coming up here on the 18th and 19th. Ray McGovern is part of that. Maybe a lot of you know him, but I just thought I'd throw that out. I put a note in the chat.
Thank you for that.
I don't know how to raise my hand either. So I just want to say I don't put any faith at all in a technical fix to this. And I want to support Leona by offering opposition to the beginning of the nuclear fuel cycle, the mining stage. That to me is really important. That's where all the injustice began, and that's where all the weapons proceed from, and the nuclear power, which is not a solution, as Leona said, for climate. There is no solution to the waste problem. New Mexico has seen disaster after disaster with nuclear pollution, and so I really don't think there is a technical fix for the waste storage, or they would have found it by now. They have suggested all kinds of things which are ridiculous and don't work, including in New York.
One thing that would work, that's on the books since the 1960s, is to bring 180 million acre feet of water east and south out of the Rockies from Alaska, whatever, and build 2 or 3 reservoirs there in New Mexico and Arizona. It's called the Parsons Engineering Company. It's on the books.
If we had that much water, I think our people would be so happy to have all of that water in the desert, but we wouldn't want it to be, to clean up radioactive waste. That's what has been happening.
You're not going to clean it up.
It's just going to reduce the radiation, but you have to maintain that level in perpetuity, which we cannot do. So now they're talking about SMNRs, they're talking about all this new technology. Right now, if we did have, I think we just need to stop and, figure it out. I see Lucy has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It just occurred to me that, especially you're part of it, it exposes all the way this one problem connects all of the other social justice issues.
You muted yourself, Lucy. Lucy, the last thing we heard is it connects all the social justice, all the issues, and then you muted.
Lucy, unmute yourself, please. Sorry.
Right, poverty, discrimination, the way we, economics and
reproductive justice, food sovereignty.
Exactly, and using it's not the Native Americans, but also Black people. The place in Tennessee was used because poor Black people are not going to speak up. They have issues about feeding their own children, so all of the social issues are connected in this, and I wish that we could work on that. Everybody that's interested in all of it, the topic, the idea came up at the last meeting of Pax Christi against nuclear war back in, I can't remember, anyway, but it was in New York City. There was a book on it. So I just appreciate you bringing another facet to the problem,
Thanks, Lucy. And that's my point. Savannah Riverside, Hanford, all these places, the Marshall Islands. Someone had their hand up and I don't know. I think maybe she left. Oh, Emily, was it Emily?
Hi, I just wanted to thank you, Leona, for your work and briefly say that I was at St. Michael. That's where I'm in New Mexico too. We may have been there at the same time. Anyway, just to add, so I've kept my, activism and spirituality often in two different places as well. And I'm trying to put them together a little bit more now. And so I don't know if this is helpful to people, but I just thought I'd offer. From my time spent with Native elders from the Pueblos all the way to New Segovia, which is Nevada, people talk about how from a spiritual perspective, uranium has a job to do it has to stay in the earth. And the Diné word is chitzot. I don't know if I'm saying that right or not, but close. It's hard to. But just to add that other spiritual dimension to things, I think it's really interesting that many Indigenous communities are where the uranium deposits are. And I don't know if all of the Indigenous communities have the teaching of like, you have to keep this stuff in the ground. I won't talk much about that, but it feels like maybe time to bring a little more, I don't know if more people around are a little more receptive. I don't know. It's a really interesting time we're living in, but maybe to bring a little bit of those traditional teachings forward. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same place, and there's a lot of teachings. I've heard some. One teaching I heard is that it helps to balance and regulate the weather. And that's from a different nation, not my nation. So, taking all this out, it was part of the formation of the earth. So now that culture, they're teaching about weather, we can all see it, with climate change. But yeah, I think one of the things about prayer I saw on the list, there's all those different levels. And I am trying to pray more about nuclear. I never, I pray for my mom, I pray for myself, things like that. I never think to pray about nuclear, but I saw that in the pastoral, and I think that's it's just bringing that other level in those teachings, definitely.
Thank you. And thank you for that important question. I think we're running out of time, but I do want to also mention that it is another way of praying, the type of work that Leona is doing. That is prayer, when praying with your hands. And so we are doing everything we can with our hands, with our feet, with our brains, with our hearts. And that's all we can do. We give everything we are to the work of justice. And pray, like even Pope Francis has said, that you don't need to, go to mass all the time. Even you just need to really embody that the example of Jesus, right? And that's what we try to do. And I think we are doing it as best as we can. This group is one of the groups that has been meeting, weekly, and I think has gotten hopefully a lot from it. The presentations have been very creative. They haven't necessarily stuck to, the every word in the pastoral letter, but we have gotten content that we can use to really go deeper into the understanding of the pastoral letter. So let's keep that in mind. Let's continue reading together. Let's continue praying with their feet and with their hands, with their hearts and with their minds together. And I do believe, I'm very positive that we will stop a lot of these injustices. And I do believe that, as my Indigenous siblings say, the next 7 generations will enjoy this world as well, and we'll make it a lot better as well. And so that's the work that we need to continue doing. And now I'm going to invite Sister Diane, because we're going to close, of course, with the prayer that we've been reciting every week. And then we're gonna close for the day. We're gonna say goodbye. So thank you so much, Leona, for your presentation. Thank you.
Yes, I too would like to thank Leona, and also Roxana, who's been our technical support. So thank you, Roxana. And this is not the end, though it's the last of our study sessions. It's a beginning, and we send all of you out to continue the work of the pastoral and to complete and implement it in whatever way you can. I know as I listened, I heard so many positive ways that we can continue this work. So thank you so very much. And let us conclude with prayer. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Amen. And this concludes our sessions. Thank you so much for all your time, your efforts, your brains. We really appreciate you and we really love you. And we'll see you the next time. Thank y'all. We're going to stop the recording now and we're going to say hello to each other as we usually do.